A continuación, Helen Bentley, Digital Strategy, Innovation and Experience Partner de EY Japón, nos presenta el caso de éxito, la transformación de un banco japonés con 100 años de tradición.
Hello everyone, my name is Helen Bentley. I'm a partner at EY in Japan, and my specialism is digital strategy, innovation and experience. I'm really excited to spend the next hour with you to talk through innovation in Japan, things that have changed recently, and how EY has been supporting some of our biggest clients, including one of Japan's big mega banks. Now, I want to start this presentation by telling you a little bit about innovation in Asia, particularly in Japan, from a historical perspective. And one important thing to remember is that Japan is an innovative country. Historically, since the Second World War, from 1940 onwards, Japan has created an incredible number of innovations, many of which you would recognize at home. In fact, if we look through history, we can see real innovation leaders in Japan. We have Seiichi Toyoda, who created a loom for weaving material. And he weaved material from 1913 until just after the 1930s, the First World War, when he started investigating vehicles. And he created the first Model AA Toyota car, which went on to be one of the biggest car brands in the world. And in his mind, he felt everyone, and I've written the quote here, should tackle a great project once in their lifetime. And he invented a loom in Japan and went on to invent the car. We also have here a quote from Soichiro Honda, who said, "Success can be achieved through repeated failures and introspection. In fact, success represents 1% of your work, which comes from 99% of failures." So traditionally, Japanese inventors, Japanese business leaders were very comfortable with innovation. And even today, we do have some great innovators in Japan. We have Nobel Prize winners. I've put some names on this page here for you. And yet, we've seen in the last 10 or 20 years stagnation in Japan, a lot less innovation than there used to be. And companies really struggling to change a risk-averse corporate culture. So I've put here for a few of those Japanese innovation methodologies, just to give you a bit of context. So Japanese have always been committed to continuously improving products. And they've been focused on a respect for society and respect for people. So some of their methodologies include Kaizen, which means continuously improving your business operations. Kanban, and Kanban, I've put a picture here. It's now become the basis for digitalized dashboards in which we go through processes and operational systems worldwide. And you can see those two methodologies, Kaizen and Kanban, helped Toyota, just as an example, to become the quickest manufacturer of cars in the world, averaging an hour 6 minutes to complete a vehicle. And then we have Genchi Genbutsu. And this is a process whereby Japanese believe that to understand how to create a product, how to improve a service, how to develop a new business, you have to be on the ground with your people. And you can see some of those inventions that you've probably experienced yourself. The Sony Walkman, where we first started listening to music as we walked around the streets. The camera, both the Canon and Nikon camera and the camcorder. And moving forwards, we have the humanoid robotics, the Shinkansen bullet train, which was the fastest in the world in the 1960s. Blue LED light, which has been a huge technological transformation and helped us to uncover many other things that we can do with light. And there's also a good example here of how Japanese have helped to innovate for disabled people. You see these marks on the road sometimes, and that was created by a Japanese person who was going blind. So with all of this innovation, these innovative methodologies, these great innovative products that have come through the history of Japan, why is it that today, in 2020, Japan does not even make the list of the most innovative countries in the world? It has fallen off the top 10. In fact, the most unicorn startups you can see there in the US and in China. Japan only has one unicorn startup at the moment. And at the bottom here, you can see that Japan has fallen to be 121 out of 153 countries for gender inclusivity. So they've got big challenges in terms of mobilizing their workforce and creating a diverse environment for new ideas. And this is where I come in and how I support Japanese firms. One of the things that I've noticed through my 15 years of researching Japanese companies is that now, because of the great success that those Japanese innovative leaders had in the 1920s, 30s, 1950s and 60s, all the way through to the 80s, the next generation of leaders are quite risk averse. They don't want to make mistakes. They don't want to be embarrassed in the workplace. And that issue is partly caused by the long-term employment culture. If you join a company in Japan, typically you'll stay in that company for your entire working life, which means that you are very unlikely to want to risk or take a big risk at work. In addition to that, most university students are encouraged by their families and by society to join a big Japanese company. Because there are many big Japanese companies, it's easy to join one of those after university. So that startup incubation period that often comes out of universities is unfortunately dwindling in Japan. So EY has been helping some of these big traditional Japanese corporates to think about how they can create an innovation culture, to encourage employees to work more innovatively, to adapt more agile frameworks and systems, and to reduce that fear of risk. And what we've said is, in an innovation ecosystem, there are 5 key elements. We have the core innovation services. This is the basics that you'll need to create the right framework for innovation. A funding model, and I'll tell you more about that in a moment, but this is the idea of creating a funding model within a big corporation that is similar to that a startup would go through as it's testing out and prototyping new ideas. We have this innovation accelerator network, and that's the idea that today's modern economy especially is not really suited to companies working in silos. It's very important to create an innovation ecosystem and to be very agile in the way that you work with new partners. We then have the asset and portfolio management. What we've noticed, and this isn't just in Japanese companies actually, this is in big global corporations worldwide. Often teams work in silos. They come up with a good idea for a new AI, data analytics tool, blockchain, a new piece of customer UX or UI design, and they don't often share that material or information with other teams, especially not within other countries. They tend to work in their own area. And the problem with that is you get a huge amount of waste of money, waste of resources, waste of talent. And the product that comes out could have been a lot better if teams had worked together cross-border and cross-function. So we've created a system for encouraging that. And finally, and this is what I'll focus on today, is culture and incentives. So we see that there are a lot of trapped assets in firms. There are mixed messages that are coming from leadership. And this creates a black market of innovation. You know, you share this piece of information with me and I'll do this for you. And Japan, that's coupled with risk aversion. So people tend to keep information tied to themselves rather than share it in an open network. And we're trying to encourage that change. So first thing is core innovation services. Now, the idea here is that we create an innovation concierge that works across different regions, countries, accounts, departments, and solutions, brings together every different innovative idea. And the idea here is that you can either post your idea for a change in your business, a new product, a new service, or a new business model onto a portal or a website or an application. And it will go through a system where it is offered support from people who've worked on innovation projects before. Alternatively, you could make a phone call and speak directly to an innovation expert or concierge member who will tell you if your idea has really got legs and should be pursued. The big advantage of a system like this is it's opening to the whole company to come forwards and give innovative ideas. It's praising the most junior member of staff if they've got a good idea to the most senior member of staff. It's completely transparent. And the other advantage of this is just because you have a good idea doesn't mean that you're the right person to pursue that specific project. And actually, perhaps you would benefit from working with others in the organization you have more technical experience, for example. And the innovation concierge will know the full set of capabilities in your organization and the portfolio of partners that you have outside your organization, especially with universities, so that you can make your idea a reality. So this is the first port, this core innovation services concierge system, which we're putting in place for some of our corporates. The next key part is this integrated stage funding. If you look at this, this is typically the funding model you would see for a startup. A startup would go for seed funding, a small amount of money from $20,000 US to $100,000 US dollars to get their idea off the ground. It would then move through Series A, B, C funding until it moves into the open market and then moves on to IPO if it's a startup that's functioning well. We wanted to bring this funding model into a traditional business, which is actually very hard to do. It looks quite simple, but most corporates have traditional systems that have been developed over years. And funding tends to go through a channel, i.e. you ask your manager for funding support for something. And if they say no, then it's game over for your idea. Well, coupling this with the innovation concierge that I've just mentioned, you could be from any department in the business and apply for seed funding. And if you get your seed funding, it doesn't just come with finance. It may come with physical resources, people resources, digital tools and assets, and in some cases, physical space. You will then be given 6 to 8 weeks to trial. You may only be given 30% of your working time to do this. You still have a day job. Or if it's something that the company really wants to back, you may be allowed to give a sabbatical to focus on your idea. At the end of those 6 to 8 weeks, you will pitch your ideas to a senior committee of advisors in your area or where your idea fits. And if they like the idea, they will back what we call a pilot stage. And when we move into the pilot stage, particularly if it's a product or a service, we'll be using agile and design thinking methodologies to turn that idea into a reality in quick time. One of a good example of a client we worked for with that was Emirates. Emirates in Dubai, big airline, and we supported them a number of years ago now to do a series of rapid innovative sprints to try and change the way that their company was organized, how they went to market, and the services they offered their customers. Following those pilots, what we then try and do is move into Series B funding. And to raise that funding, we may open source the funding, a little bit like crowdsourcing, but within a company. So different members of the organization can bid a certain amount of money on this idea or pilot technology. And as a result of their investment, they will be the departments that are able to access and use that technology when it is available and it's been tested. And then we'll move through the business into Series C funding and then open market. At that stage, there may then be a decision as to whether that product, service, or idea stays in company, moves out company and is spun off into its own organization, or is taken on by a partner organization. So I mentioned earlier the importance of your innovation acceleration network. We've shown here just an example with the US and how we would create in the US as a sample market different satellites and flagships for innovation hubs. Now, in a minute, I'm going to be showing you an example from Japan of where we created an innovation hub for MUFG, and that's called Spark. And the idea is that we would create these incubators, these accelerators across the world in various markets. And it's an idea that came from EY's WaveSpace network. WaveSpace has been hugely successful for us. We now have 36 WaveSpace centers around the world, and we have 20 additional small, not flagships, but satellite centers that we can use at pop-ups at client sites. And what EY's WaveSpace environment does is it brings together the best of our technologists, our design thinkers, our creatives, our young professionals, our expert professionals together in one space and creates them an environment with the right tools and technologies to rapidly prototype those ideas. That network is also plugged into a significant number of startups in various markets around the world who can help develop those new proof of concepts. And we started now rolling this idea of wave space out some of our major clients, one of which is MUFG, but there are several others in our global network that we supported to create innovation hubs. And I'm sure that if you talk to your local representatives from your local wave spaces, they'll be able to tell you the work they're doing in their markets. So what happens then? We have all these new assets, products, services that have been developed in an organization. The concierge is up and running. The finance model is functioning. We have a global network of incubators. Now you have a huge number of products that need a home. And what we've proposed to companies is that we create an online portal. We are running this in EY as well at the moment. And it's a struggle for us internally to find all of the different tools and technologies different teams have been creating. But the idea is that we pull them all together in one space, and we really focus then on creating an open innovation network so that the whole of our organization can access those new digital tools, connect with new digital talent. And as part of that, we've tried to create this open network talent sourcing as well, so that we've got profiles of our different digital skill sets within the organization, and wherever you are in the world, you can connect to the right talent. And that's how I've been connected to your teams in Latin America. And finally, and this is what I'll go on to talk about in the most detail with you today, in the case of MUFG, is culture and incentives. You can have the best innovation framework set up in your company, but if your employees are risk averse or concerned about taking risks with their current projects to work on something new that may not generate profit for 2 to 3 to 5 to 10 years, then you're not going to get much change happening. So we've had to think about how we can change culture. And that is the hardest thing to do of all. No one wants to perform poorly at work. And a lot of that change of culture is changing KPI and metrics. So we're thinking about how to change the way that people are measured in their organization, what we value in terms of the work that they do. We've also tried to think through these 5 different areas. The first one is boosting morale. It's really important that your employees are excited at work, that they can see a vision of the future that they believe in and want to be part of. And it's quite hard to do that when day to day they may be performing a repetitive function as part of the organization. So we try to have a lot of internal and external innovation speakers readily available to answer questions and excite our young professionals and our more experienced professionals to be more innovative. We've also created these cultural mover programs, which many companies have now. This is this innovation ambassador idea program, newsletters, different online portals, videos that can showcase the best of the innovative work that's happening and encourage other people to try new things. Leaderboards, Innovator of the Month competitions, we've started those at MUFG. And sales and credit reward schemes. This is a bit harder to implement. We've not successfully implemented it in many companies yet. But this is the idea that if you've come up with an idea and you've taken it all the way through from prototype, through to pilot, through to successful launch within a big company, well, then you should get a share financially of the reward that comes from that success. So we've kind of called this sales or credit system, where you'll get a percentage, either a raise or some sort of financial contribution as a result of your efforts as an individual in the firm. And then finally, those performance metrics, that's important to change. If those KPI don't change and your employees don't see a benefit in putting investment into small startup projects, then change won't happen. So I'm going to talk to you now briefly in the last 10-15 minutes of my presentation today about MUFG. MUFG is a major Japanese mega bank. It's one of the leading banks in the world, and it is incredibly traditional. You will find that most big banks in most countries are very traditional, and there's a lot for them to lose. So that risk culture that we've spoken about earlier, it's even worse in a big bank where there are many regulations and controls in place, and where employees really can't afford to make mistakes. So MUFG came to my team and they said, look, we want to do what EY is doing. We want to create a wave space environment. We want our young people to be excited, trying new ideas without fearing failure. We want to create an ecosystem with new partners. We want to create a physical space where these people can work. and we potentially want to spin off this part of the organization from our traditional place. So this was the main question they tasked us. How can MUFG effectively drive innovation internally and build a better external ecosystem to drive meaningful digital transformation? And the project included defining a vision, a mission for innovation, creating a new brand with a new identity and a culture change program, creating an ecosystem to engage startups and partner companies, developing a unique environment. We created a 5-story building full of innovation, which unfortunately now, due to COVID-19, isn't being used. But we then had to create a virtual environment where we could house these people. And then we had to create a comprehensive series of events, a customer journey plan, and engage employees with new innovation mindset. So this space was called Spark. We created it in Tokyo, including the name, the branding, the logo, as you can see there, and we helped to design the innovation hub. This went through a period, quite a short period to begin with, of 3 months to come up with the strategy, the space design, some of the contents, those events, workshops, operations and ecosystems, and marketing and communications. We also did a lot of stakeholder mapping and programs to think about how to engage employees. So I won't go into too much detail around the strategic planning, and I'll move on to the more exciting bit of the creative work that we did. You can see here some of the creative brand activations that we worked on, and it's quite hard to start a new brand within a traditional company. Obviously, it takes a lot of time to go through the legal processes, but actually it worked really, really well. And you can see here we created the brand Spark, which linked to innovation, this spark of ideas. And we went around this theme of space. So even the water bottles there are shaped like planets. We have a big basement area where we have stars and planets floating through the roof. We brought in a lot of different new branding that would help to create a cohesive, unique brand identity that was different from the main bank. You can see there the Spark t-shirts, the Spark hoodies, the Spark brands. We also partnered with new local artists to create new innovative designs. And you can see here on this pamphlet, we created a new innovative brand for the team members who were involved. They each created this new, cool, kind of funky identity, which was quite different from the traditional bank. This is an image of the space that we created. We put games around the space and environment to encourage creativity. We had some of the employees come in and think through what they would want in the space. We added more greenery, for example. We created a playlist of great music that could be on in the background, which was quite unique for this bank. We also helped design the furniture and the layouts of the environment. And then we started the program of events. And one of the important lessons that we learned is that really to champion a culture change program, it needs to come from the top. And you can see here there's an image of the CFO of MUFG who came to speak. This was a digitalized event that was showcased around the world, where he talked about the importance of Spark and innovation for the bank. You can see he's wearing an MUFG Spark hoodie in addition to his suit and tie. So even he was trying to change his image and cultural approach. And then you can see the number of startups on the image on the far left where it says Spark at the top. Below, there's about 30 different small companies or startups that were pitching their ideas to MUFG to get financial support. And in addition to that, the use of MUFG's resources to take their program forward. So this is part of the ecosystem, part of the project. You can see the culture change program here. For a traditional bank, it was quite unique to have employees acting in this kind of crazy creative way, and we wanted to take that through from start to finish of their experience. So this is a good example of digital business cards. In Japan, traditionally you would hand a business card with 2 hands and bow, and instead we created these that could be shown on a phone. So you just scan the QR code and all of their details will go straight into your contact address book. We then created a series of activations that would help people to think about being more creative in their day-to-day work. There's 2 ideas that I've shown for you here. Number 1 is Sparklers program, which is where you take a photograph on a Polaroid camera of a team member who you think is really innovative, and you write why they're innovative on the bottom of the picture. and pin it on a board in the main office. And every month, one person will be selected as the sparkler of the month, the person who's behaving in the most innovative way, and they'll get some kind of fun or cool prize. And that's just to drive people supporting other colleagues who are doing things a bit differently or interestingly. And the second idea here is these Spark superheroes. And this is a design thinking and agile program, lasts anything from 3 days to 6 weeks. And it's where we bring together the new graduates who've just finished university to get an induction into agile ways of working, design thinking methodologies, and they can start bringing their own ideas together and working as a team. The idea is that a group of 6 work together on a task for the bank, some sort of creative new idea, and the team who wins the project become the superheroes and get their cape and mask. This program was going to be rolled out. It had to be put on pause because of COVID-19, but we hope to resume it, or rather MUFG hopes to resume it in the future. Then we thought, how are we going to energize these teams? So you can see on the left-hand side here, a variety of different events, and on the right-hand side, this interesting calendar of things that people could tune into. We had Ignite events, which was bringing influencers, leaders, other stakeholders to the Spark environment to inspire staff and employees, workshops to bring teams together to ideate and solve problems, step-up events, which is where people could connect with experts in fields that they wouldn't normally work in. That's particularly focused on technology experts, power-up events, and that's bringing people from outside the organization to come in and bring new ways of working. Connect events, which are just more fun events to help connect people together, and that includes film nights, and LIT events, which is learning, interacting, and transforming events to create employee wellness and good positive mindset. And that included yoga and meditation lessons. I'll skip through the next couple of pages because I know we're running out of time, but this is just to show you here that we then took this physical concept and moved it virtually. And you can see the Wave Space team from EY, they're going in to deliver some very innovative workshops to help think through this process. And you can see here on this video that's moving, we also created new tools and technologies in MUFG Spark. And this is an AR app that we created in just 3 days. We brought together technologists, designers, and people within the organization who knew MUFG's innovative past. And we created a pamphlet that could go around the whole company and could be sent to people virtually as well, so that they could have a tour of the building and get a view of MUFG's historical past with regards to innovation. And that was hugely successful. Particularly the company said to us that they never would have been able to do something that quickly. In just 3 days, it would have taken 6 to 8 weeks working in a waterfall fashion to create something like this. And we did it in just 3 days. That was a huge success for us. We also created a range of project mapping and new video digital assets with a creative team. And we trained up some team members to be able to create those in-house as well. And we supported them to create a new online brand through their website and social media platforms. Final note from me is that I'm really thrilled to say that we won an innovation award for our work contributing not just to this project, but to innovating across a broad range of companies in Japan and overseas, and indeed to helping EY to innovate. And I hope that we can continue to drive innovation and cultural change. So that's all from my presentation today. I'll hand back now to the panel and see if anyone's got any questions. Okay, I can see some questions have come in on the chat here, so I'll be reading off from these. Question number 1 is, what similarities or differences might you identify between Japanese culture and Latam culture that might accelerate or break a transformation such as the one that you have shared? Well, I don't know the Latam culture, Latin American culture very well, but I have heard that companies that are successful, big organizations, tend to be very risk averse and driven in a hierarchical fashion. And Japan is very much the same. So I think that that's a similarity that we have been able to overcome recently through our work with traditional Japanese companies. And I think that it just takes a significant amount of support from the senior people in an organization to do that. If you don't have the senior leaders driving that change, it simply won't happen. And I would encourage all of you to look at Akio Toyoda and the work he's done at Toyota to drive cultural change within that organization. He's been a CEO within Japan that's really helping to drive cultural change and supporting technological revolution in that firm. I think another cultural similarity may be that the Latin American culture and Japan tends to be quite traditional and community-based. So you really care about what other people think about what you're doing. You want to make a good impression. We've struggled to overcome that issue in Japan because humans are by nature risk averse and they want to do well by their bosses. And the way we've changed that is by altering the KPI so that people really feel enabled and inspired to try new things without fearing causing problems for a business. The second thing that we've advised in some cases is that companies create a spin-off organization which can have its own rules, its own processes, its own systems, its own physical location, so that it's not threatened by the local culture of the traditional business. I'm seeing there's 9 questions coming in, so I'm going to quickly go through them as fast as I can. What do you think the role of communication or storytelling plays in convincing stakeholders they need to change, transform, or evolve? That, I think, is the key. The storytelling part of the puzzle is essential. And I'll tell you why. Because these days, employees have much higher expectations of leaders and businesses. They can move companies. There are plenty of options for them to join new digital companies and tech startups. So if you're a traditional organization, you have to keep your employees engaged. You also have to think about shareholders. And shareholders today are caring about much more than the bottom line. They're wondering, as a company, are you going to meet diversity and inclusion quotas? Are you going to be focused on sustainability and climate change goals? Are you behaving responsibly as an organization? And finally, you have then society as a whole. Social media now is opening up for people to be criticized quite freely and businesses to be criticized. So if the communication isn't right, and if you aren't clearly showing your employees, your shareholders, the society as a whole, what you're doing to deliver on these promises for the future, you're missing out big time. You're missing out on opportunities really to position yourself as a brand of the future. And we've seen time and time again, companies that fail to do that get forgotten about. We see companies that have pivoted and changed. A good example of that is Panasonic. Panasonic has moved from being B2C, creating some of those household appliances, to being B2B corporation. And they've moved into the solar powered industry. And without the effective communications around that investment and shift in their business model wouldn't have been successful. And yet it's been a huge success for the firm. So storytelling isn't just important for convincing stakeholders that they need to change. It's important for proving that you're going to change as an organization to your employees and to driving that shareholder appetite for change, which can be quite difficult in a traditional organization. That's my view anyway. I think communications is key, absolutely essential to any transformation program. And at EY, I do a lot of work on just developing those communications. And to that point, I'll add one more thing, which is it's not just the exciting part of communications that we need to think about, building a brand, marketing, selling the story. It's also risk management part of communications, crisis communications. What happens if one of these technologies that you back goes wrong? What happens if as an organization you plan to change and transform and that transformation doesn't happen, or one of your employees does something on social media that goes against what you are telling the media you are doing as an organization? Those crisis mitigation plans are really important now, especially given this age of social media. A good example of that is Samsung. I'm sure some of you remember those exploding phones a few years ago. And as those phones were exploding, they had to think very quickly on their feet as to how to maintain customer confidence. Nobody wants to have a phone that's going to set on fire. And they also had to manage that message in multiple markets and multiple languages. And they struggled with that. A second example is Chipotle, a restaurant chain in the US. When they had an outbreak of food poisoning, the CEO came out and said, "I promise we will never have an outbreak of food poisoning again." And the next day, a food poisoning outbreak happened in 6 other stores, and that totally damaged their reputation. So a lot of my time is spent training CEOs, business leaders, and also managers and employees about the importance of that message. And it's spent coming up with crisis mitigation plans. So as you go through your transformation, you're ready in case something goes wrong. Okay, I see a few more questions coming up here. I hope to get through them all. Let's have a look. This looks like an interesting question here. Which is the main barrier to innovate with new technologies in an organization, and how do you manage those barriers with clients? I hate to speak to EY's strengths and seem like I'm selling EY, but I think one of the things that EY is very good at is risk management. And I think risk management is one of the biggest barriers to innovating with new technologies. Quite simply, if you don't get that right and you innovate with a new technology, then you can be detrimentally affecting your business. And EY is very good at thinking through the regulation, the compliance, the tax implications of innovating with a new technology. We also have a very strong cybersecurity division that's thinking through some of those cyber risks that you are going to be going through if you implement a new technology. And that certainly is a big challenge. The second thing that I would say is a barrier to that innovation is finance. This is why we've created the seed financing model, if you remember that triangle I showed you earlier, because it's really, technological change takes a huge investment of money and resources and time. And you don't always have that ready to hand in a business. And sometimes you have to do technological change slowly, department by department. And that's not a very effective way of innovating. And it's not always what I encourage, but that's better than not doing any technological change at all. So finance often comes as a big issue. And the third challenge, and it's something that we've tried to change in EY, is talent and training. You can't just change your technologies overnight without changing the way that your employees behave. And the training program that you need in place so that they can keep up with the pace of change is very important. The last thing you want is a group of employees who are very skilled and experienced feeling like they don't belong in the company because they can't keep up with the technological change. So we do also internally within EY roll out a lot of different talent and training programs to keep up with that pace of change. So from my perspective, they're the 3 big barriers. The first one is that risk management. You have to get that right. The second one is funding and financing. And as a CEO or a business leader, deciding which technology to invest in can be quite a challenge. And the third one then is that talent and training. How do we get our employees on board and engaged? It tends to be the case that the smaller organizations are more agile and can adapt to that technological change quicker, but sometimes they have less finances to do so. Okay, I'm going to move on because I see quite a few questions left. And it's difficult when you're doing this virtual type of presentation because normally I like to be chatting to you all and having a more open discussion. So I'm sure you're tired of hearing my voice now, but I'll answer a few more questions if I can. A good one that's come up here is, hi, I'm Japanese. I work in EY Peru. Pleased to meet you. I want to know, how is the client communication working through the project, as Japan is a country where not many people speak English, and that applies to companies too. Well, this links to the last question about a barrier to technological change. It really does, because sometimes we find that one of the teams that can do a technological implementation program is not based in Japan, and they really struggle to make that transformation program happen in a traditional Japanese company. I'm going to broaden your question, not just to focus on communication in Japan, but into any market that's working in multiple languages. It's a massive, massive challenge. I speak Japanese, not perfectly fluently, but I speak it in a business context. And even I have challenges sometimes understanding the nuances. I would advise when you are planning a project in a different country with a different language to allocate more time, because in general, I find that more issues arise that need addressing. I would also advise making sure that there is a sufficient number, I'd say 20% to 30% minimum of the team need to be truly bilingual. And you need to understand that those team members are going to have a very hard time because they are keeping the project running. So keeping them engaged and happy is very important. And they need to be team members. In my experience, just getting a translator doesn't work because the translator is trying really hard to keep up, but they don't have the project knowledge. They can't build the relationships that are necessary. The third thing that I would say is workshopping through problems often is really important, especially in a culture that's more less willing to say openly what they think. So in Japan, we do a lot of anonymous polling, the virtual online surveys, to get client sentiment and team member sentiment to see how they're feeling about how the project's going and to feed that back in. In some of the other markets we work in, it's the opposite, and people are too aggressive and combative and we can't move forwards. But in Japan, there's a real risk that the project's gone off track and you don't know because people are trying to be polite. So that's the other thing I think has worked well for us, is those anonymous polling techniques. But for sure, working in a foreign language is challenging. It's been challenging in Japan. We've implemented as much as we can those policies of getting 20 to 30% of the team to be bilingual, doing the anonymous polling to find out what people really think, and also just being really positive and patient because things do take longer. Okay, a couple more questions. There's 11 come in, so you're a very active group, which I love. I don't know if I'll get through all 11, but I'll try. How to balance the running of the bank and disruption of the bank? Should they separate efforts in teams? Okay, I'm gonna change this from talking about a bank to just in general speaking about big firms that are trying to do change. I have seen both things work and both fail. The problem with creating a separate team and a separate entity is they tend to be siloed and they end up in their own world and they do fantastic work and no one in the main organization knows about it or cares about it. In fact, sometimes the main organization employees feel threatened by their startup, and politically they try to stop it from actually having the right impact. That's a huge risk when you do a spin-off. The second risk is that without that effective two-way communication, those team members that are running their own business create something that just doesn't fit with what the main organization is trying to achieve in their business strategies. And they may create a fantastic asset, service, business model, but it just doesn't fit with the overall strategy of the company. And the third challenge that you get, and this is really a big one, is the brand identity can be vastly different. And that's a positive in the sense that you may be able to acquire new talent into the new business that are quite excited to work within this new brand. But it's a challenge because sometimes fitting that new brand identity with the main business is hard, and you struggle to get the right talent to apply or to continue working for the original company as they all flock to this new startup. So that is some of the negatives. On the positive side, building that spin-off company or team, you get increased creativity, excitement and buzz about change. You can take away some of the traditional processes and systems, and that includes you can change the KPI. One of the big challenges that we have especially for salespeople in sales-driven organizations, is that they have sales targets, and typically a new innovative piece of work will not achieve that sales target quickly. So you can create those separate things for them. What we've done in some of the big organizations to mitigate the risks and promote the positives is secondments. So the team is floating, and as a manager, you will send one of your team members to work in this incubator for a very short period of time, 4 to 6 weeks. And that's a good way. We tend to see employees at year 3 switch companies, and it's a good way to keep them in your organization for longer, because it does cost money when people leave and you have to train someone new, is to send them to the incubator and then bring them back. So that means having a small team of maybe 5, and that's what they have at the bank, that run the incubator day to day, and then tag teams that come from all over the organization on a 6 to 8 week rolling basis, sometimes shorter, 4 weeks. The other advantage of doing that is you can get people from various functions within the firm to work together to ideate on problems. The second thing that has happened in the past is if you create your small incubator and you effectively implement an innovation concierge system, is you get whole teams that apply for that funding, the resource, the space, and to go and work in for a period of weeks or months. And that sometimes has been successful as well. But I'm not specifically speaking about the bank that we've worked with on that one. I'm just talking in general. Okay, a couple of other things. How do you deal with failure when transforming an enterprise? How do you deal with failure as an individual? Humans are terrible with failure. We don't like to feel that we've failed. And that is the wrong mindset. The true innovators, as we saw in the presentation with Honda, understand that 99% of the time you'll fail, or 1% of the time you'll succeed. And the best advice I can give to companies is get a diversified portfolio. You have to have a diverse range of ideas. You have to fail fast. As soon as one of them's failing, don't be scared to kill it off and follow another idea. You have to keep that engine of new ideas churning. You have to get a rapid proof of concept in place quickly. And that's the way that you can get your, killer idea. So how does a company then cope with failure? Well, typically not very well, especially CEOs maybe on 3 or 4 year contracts, because they need to get in and make a quick impact on the business. Now, in Japanese companies, you tend to have people in leadership positions for maybe a longer period of time, and they tend to have a long-term value approach, which is something that EY recommends to all of our clients worldwide. If you can take the long-term value approach, then you can feel more comfortable with short-term failures to get towards that long-term goal. So if you can implement that, a long-term value viewpoint, if you can have leadership that are comfortable with not always succeeding in their tenure, but also getting recognition if a success comes later. And if you can build a culture of rapid ideation, rapid prototyping, and failing fast, often in incubators, it can be quite successful. Couple more, and then I think we'll be closing the hour. I think I need a good cup of coffee. Been chatting to you through the whole time here. Okay, what is your opinion on more diversity and innovation? Would more women, global employees, and younger employees foster innovation? It's a really good question. You can look at it 2 ways. One is, when you have greater diversity of thought and opinions, you do get more ideas, but it's also harder to ensure effective communication, stakeholder alignment, and the pursuing of one innovation idea to successful completion. And traditionally in Japan, where you've seen maybe a lack of diversity, but a focus on process improvement and process optimization, you've seen a great series of product innovations, right? So diversity on its own is not the answer. You can't say just because you have a diverse group of employees, you're going to have success. But if you get the right diverse group of people, and my team is 100% diverse, let me be clear, we've had team members from Venezuela, Poland, France, Germany, Ireland, Australia, Singapore, Indonesia, China, Taiwan, Japan, England, oh gosh, a bunch of others, America. Where else have we had? Huge range, Colombia, a huge range of people that have come through my team. And with the right systems in place so that you have effective and open communication, and you have people willing to take on the other people's ideas, and that fail fast mentality of it's not the individual that's at fault, we're a team here, it's just an idea, if it works, great, if it doesn't, we'll move on, then diversity, I think, is absolutely the way to go. Would more women foster more innovation? To that point, the more diverse ideas you've got, the more likely you will fall upon a gemstone. And again, my team, I insist on 50% diversity, 50 women, 50 female, 50 male. And that's just to create that fantastic range of different ideas. But again, if you don't have the right company culture, just bringing women into an organization without the right support network is a very hard road for them to walk down. And in Japan, I've often been the only woman in the room. And that can be challenging, right? You can be lonely. You can throw ideas out there that sometimes there is discrimination and they don't get listened to. So you have to think about that. You can't just create diversity. You have to create a diverse culture, and a culture that's ready to support these new talents, diverse in terms of background, and diverse in terms of personal identity and thought. And if you have that right culture, it's definitely a recipe for success, in my opinion. Gosh, okay, more are coming in. 8 minutes. Okay. Innovation is messy and difficult to articulate. How do you go about it? It's certainly hard with investors, I'll tell you that. And return investment for a strong innovation program may not happen for 3, 5, 10 years. How do you justify that? Huge amount of stakeholder management is required to even just continue to stay alive and to keep getting the funding and to keep getting the resources and to not be forgotten about. Very messy, very challenging, just in terms of stakeholder management. And then innovation is messy and difficult to articulate in terms of a concept. Absolutely, I could not agree with that more, right? Because we can try and separate innovation. So typically you might think of product innovation, service innovation, business model innovation, cultural innovation. If you were to categorize into 4 elements. And if you look at those, different countries tend to do better on different areas. So Japan, for example, has been a product innovation center of excellence. In fact, I believe it's true that the top 10 companies in Japan invest more into research and development, R&D, than all the companies and government in the UK combined, right? Because it's been a product-driven innovation center of excellence. So for the Japanese, innovation would probably look like taking a product, incremental change over time, improving that product until it's of exceptional quality, and then moving on to a fairly similar product and doing the same again. That's how we've seen innovation in household products like televisions, cameras, screens, etc. over time. Cookers. A market like the UK, and probably like the US as well, would typically favor service innovation. It's a service industry. That's how they prove their innovation capabilities. And that's where you're thinking about companies like Uber, for example, that started as this taxi service of people and has moved now onto food and beverages, or Airbnb, that's looking into service of how you can reuse space, physical space, for a new purpose. And that service is now turned into experiences, and they're trying to sell experiences through that service platform. So how do you articulate innovation? I think it means different things to different countries. It means different things to different cultures. It means different things to different companies. We all agree it's necessary, and we all agree it's very difficult to do. And my advice would probably be, determine what your USP is as a company or as a culture or as a society. Determine what you can do really well in terms of affecting change. and then focus on that with real precision. Think about some methodologies or systems that might help that to be achieved. In the case of Japan again, let's think about those methodologies. Kaizen, Kanban, that's all process innovation, minute incremental innovation, as opposed to whole state sweeping business model transformation, which suits some other markets. I think I'm seeing typing happening, so that suggests to me another question's coming in. I'll wait to see that one before I choose the final one to answer in the last 4 minutes. Okay, I see one here that's come in. Oh, I see two here, okay. Two different questions here. I probably only have time for one. I'm sorry, I have to choose. Let's pick. Okay, I'll try and quickly deal with two questions. Oh, there might be a third one popping in. Oh gosh, there's a third one. Oh no. Oh, these are all great questions coming in at the last minute. What to pick? All right, I'll do the simplest first. Any ideas on how to foster diversity, particularly in the financial sector? Few women. I mean, we've sort of touched on this before. I'll briefly mention one thing, and that is the importance of mentorship and sponsorship. Mentorship, that's someone who's telling you day to day what you're getting right, what you're getting wrong, and having a very open conversation with you. Sponsorship is someone who is looking throughout the business, picking out that new talent and giving them new opportunities. That is not necessarily your line manager. And one thing I always think is to really engage that next generation of talent, we need more sponsors looking out to champion females in the organization, specifically in the case where there aren't enough of them, for example, and giving them that sponsorship, giving them that opportunity to try something new. Because sometimes they kind of get stuck in the organization and they're moving in this hierarchy. And in the cases where discrimination is happening, that isn't always helpful for them. So sponsorship, I think, is really important. As leaders, we have a responsibility to be sponsoring and championing new people with new ideas, regardless of their backgrounds. The second thing is we do need more female leaders so that they can inspire and engage the next generation. And hopefully that's happening. It's slow and depends on the market, but we are seeing some more women really doing a great job and showing people they should be getting involved, especially with new technologies. I'm going to jump to the next question because we've got 1 minute left. Look, IBM has consistently submitting the most patents in the USA. They've not been able to capture value. How do you reconcile that? It's not in my position to speak about IBM specifically. I wouldn't want to speak about another company specifically on this call. What I would say though is just because you haven't got all of the value out of a certain project and doesn't mean it was a waste of time. And sometimes you need a significant number of failures to hit on a success. One good example would be Dyson. And there were a significant number of Dyson patents that went in before of the winning one that transformed the vacuum industry. So we have to just be aware that that's part of the process, I'm afraid. And we're at time. And there's one more. There's 4 more questions. There's one more that's just popped in, and I'm sorry that's all we've got time for today. But I really appreciate you all tuning in. It's been super fun talking with you, although it's been a bit challenging because we've not been able to speak one-to-one and have a conversation. I'm looking forward to meeting you all again. If you're interested in talking to me about a project, please get in touch or obviously contact EY in your local market. Thank you all for joining.